Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have a class with VIA inspections, right?
Yeah.
VIA inspections. So and this is going to be on multifamily. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tony.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope, except for the people on Zoom, you're missing out an awesome pizza.
Right.
For Petrillo's. Yeah. Petrillo's is always good. I haven't had it in a while. But yeah, thanks for being here. I know it's the middle of the day and everybody always has something going on. So I appreciate that you're here with us. My name is Tony Escamilla. I am the there we go. I'm the owner of Villa Property Inspections. We've been in business for 25 years next month. So made it. Yep. I have been a licensed, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Licensed general contractor for 23 of those 25 years. Yeah, we don't do construction work anymore. We do inspection work only. Yeah. Okay, I'm ICC certified, and what that means is that I have the same qualifications as your local city building inspector for both commercial and residential. And NACHI certified, that's one of the biggest organizations for home inspection. And I'm also a certified commercial inspector, so we do a lot of commercial work. Yeah, we did 2 churches last week, back to back. I guess churches are up for sale right now. I'm also a post-disaster inspector.
Where's the location?
LA. Both of them were in LA. Like South LA. Yeah, one of them was just a church, and then the other one was a church plus a 15 classroom building.
We're looking for a church in Glendale.
In Glendale. Okay. Yeah, I got called for a quote on one not too far from here. It's really old, beautiful church. They ended up going with somebody else, but for whatever reason, churches are the thing right now. Yeah.
I'll talk with you later.
So I've done personally over 9,000 inspections, and then of course of my inspectors. I have 3 other inspectors who work under me, and so they're building their numbers up too. So, as a gift for you, and I don't know if you were here the last time, I know you were, but as a gift for you, this is a downloadable PDF that you can give to your clients. The link, I don't think you can see it here, but I'll make sure that you get the link. It's a private URL, so you won't find it online. And you feel free to download it and give it to your clients when they have a new house or a new property.
Great.
Yeah. So today I want to talk about multifamily properties and multifamily inspections. There's a lot of different combinations for multifamily, different types of multifamily properties, different types of inspections, and different types of uses for inspections. Okay. But the first thing, and I always tell this to everybody, and Jeffrey remembers this, when I was here to do commercial a couple months ago, you always want to start if you're in multifamily or if you're in commercial, even residential, you want to have a team. And you want to have your team of all the people that you use on a regular basis so that when you have a particular type of property, you don't have to be asking around, hey, do you know somebody who does this? Or do you know somebody who does that? And I still have to get you that termite contact. Yes. We'll be talking about the difference between property assessments and property inspections. And depending on the type of commercial or multifamily property that you have, there is the inspection side and then there's the assessment side. And then what you do after the inspection. What do you do with all that information? You get a 150-page report from us. What do you do with it? And then we'll do some Q&A, but feel free if you have any questions, don't hesitate. So type of investment properties, and this is how many people here are already doing multifamily? Or are looking to get into multifamily?
Well, I think everybody is, right?
Everybody is. Yeah, so it really depends on what your client is looking for. Are they looking for a particular type of property? Are they looking for a particular location? What are their plans for the property? For example, there's a lot of people who buy single family residence for rentals. So while the single family itself is not multifamily, the fact that they own several properties like that, they have multifamily and they're going to continue buying multifamily properties. Then there's a single family flip, and there's people who get into the single family flipping, and sometimes they'll hold on to it, sometimes they'll flip it and make some quick money from it. But these are the investor type of people. These are the people who are looking to get in and out of the market, and they're not looking to hold on long term. 1 to 4 units, as you know, financing for 1 to 4 units is a lot different than financing for 5 and above. 5 and above is considered commercial. And so it's a different type of transaction altogether. And then we have, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Go backwards.
Yeah. I use a Mac. So, and then there's Airbnb rentals. For example, my brother owns 3 Airbnb rentals out in Joshua Tree, and they're single family, but those are his investments. And so he considers it as multifamily as a package. And you have the 5 and above multifamily short term. And by short term, I don't mean Airbnb. I mean people who are looking to park their money, basically. They're going to buy an apartment building. They're going to hold on to it for 2 to 3 years, let it appreciate, get some positive cash flow on it, maybe make some minor improvements, and then sell it. And then there's the long-term holders who are going to hold on to it for a while. This is going to be the investor, younger investor who's willing to hold on to it, and that is their retirement, basically. So, but each one of these is a different type of inspection, depending on what your client needs. For example, a person who's holding on to a property for 2 to 5 years, they're not going to spend money doing major capital improvements, or they're going to try really hard not to. And this is where an inspection is critical, because if you're looking to get in for 2 to 5 years, you don't want to spend $50,000 on a brand new roof, or heating and air conditioning systems, or major foundation work. So it's critical whether you are representing the buyer or representing the seller of a multifamily to do the inspection. Because we had one, I was just telling you, the one that I reviewed last night for somebody from here from this office, that got into negotiations, and now the buyer came in with some ridiculous estimates after the home inspection. And so now it really slowed everything down, and a pre-listing inspection would have prevented that, because they would have known ahead of time. They would have gotten estimates from their own contractors ahead of time, and not have to deal with some way overinflated estimate just for the purpose of negotiation. So building your team, I talked about that a little while ago. Before or even now, having a good team of people working with you makes your transaction that much easier. Regardless of what type of transaction, whether it's single family, multifamily, commercial, when you get into a transaction, especially if it's the type of property that you're not doing on a regular basis. For example, if you're doing single family right now and you land a multifamily property, different type of transaction, different type of contractors, different type of things that go wrong with those type of properties. Like I said, depending on what the client is looking for, there are different types of contacts that you're going to need. And there's one that I left out from you. I'll bring it up. Of course, you want to go inspector, so I hope to get a chance to work with you, but that's a good place to start. You need a good electrician, a good roofer. That's the first thing, the questions that I get, electrician and roofing when we do multifamily. Is if the roof is not in such good condition, how much is it gonna cost? That's the first thing everybody asks. How much is it gonna cost to repair or to replace? Same thing with electrical. And I'll touch on the electrical in a little while because some of the older buildings, particularly here in the San Gabriel Valley, are riddled with problematic electrical panels. A good plumber. I have a good contact for a plumber, by the way. A good handyman. A good termite inspector. Del Rio. That's the name of the company. But I'll get you the info.
Termite?
Yeah, termite. A good foundation contractor. I also have a good name for a foundation contractor if you need it. I've inspected this particular company's work after they're done several times, and they do fantastic work. So why a property inspection on multifamily? This is actually an inspection that we did, and I don't know if you can see that, but up here, there is an entire section of roofing that's missing. And all of these little gray areas that you see here are all shingles that are missing off of this roof. So when we went in there, this was about 65 units that we did. And yeah, that ended up costing about 30 grand to repair. It didn't need to be replaced, but just the repairs cost about 30 grand.
So all the vendors that you just listed, your team?
Yeah.
You routinely work with them?
Yeah, we routinely, you know why? Because like I said, even though I have no interest in any of these companies, I know that when I give like in real estate, when you give a referral, it's gonna hold some weight and it's a reflection of you. So having done this for as long as I've done this and as critical as I am with some of the work, I only recommend people that I've seen their work and that I'm confident. So when I give that referral, I'm confident that they're gonna do good work.
So basically, you only need one inspector, you.
Yes, I try, I don't have a good electrician, for example. I don't know any good electricians right now. I have a really good plumber out here in the San Gabriel Valley, a foundation person, a termite company. And you always try to have those contacts that you're comfortable with. It protects your client's investment. They're coming in with a lot of money. And again, like I said, depending on what they're doing, if they're holding on long-term, they expect that they're gonna spend money on capital improvements at some point. Nobody ever wants to get into the property and do a capital improvement at the beginning. So this is where the inspection is going to prevent them from getting into something that's gonna be a surprise, like the sewer, for example. Right after you get into a property, whether it's a residential or commercial or multifamily, you don't want an $8,000 bill on sewer line inspection.
Quick question.
Sure.
So when you do the inspection, did you cover all the, you just listed of 7 items in your report? That you like how old the electricity, how old this roof is, what the condition of the roof is, what the plumbing is,
Yep.
and the foundations and the termites, HVAC.
Yeah, we cover all the major systems. I'll detail it out right now, but we cover all the major systems, everything from the roof to the foundation. If there's a crawl space, we will crawl under the building or send one of our robots under the building and take a look at the foundation and take a look at the plumbing. If it's a 2-story like this and we can't reach it, we have drones that we send up to do
Awesome,
the photography.
awesome, thank you.
Do you charge extra for in order to going down to the crawl space?
Nope. Nope, everything is included. Yeah, the only thing that we charge extra for is if we're doing mold inspections or sewer camera inspections. And thermal imaging and moisture detection, we do if we find something like a some spots on the ceiling or something like that, we're gonna scan it with the thermal imaging camera. But some clients want a more in-depth scan, and so we charge extra for that. At the end, we'll come through and actually scan the entire building for moisture. And that's a different type of thing. The financially responsible thing to do, like I said, nobody ever wants to get into a building, even if they're holding on to it long-term and have to drop a lot of money in. Especially if they're holding on to it for a short term. You know, you want to make sure, of course, that it pencils out, and you know this, that it pencils out. I work with a lot of investors, so I have a lot of this in my head. That it pencils out and that they can maintain what's there rather than have to replace it until they sell the property. It removes emotions. Having a good inspection report makes it easy to make a decision on a property. If you're looking at, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 of repairs on a property, it makes it a lot easier for the potential buyer to make the decision. It's like, hey, it's just not worth it. And it's different than single family residences. From my experience, in that single family residence, when you have particularly a first time buyer or a young buyer, it's a very emotional transaction. It's very emotional. They look at the property, they get attached to the property, and they picture the white picket fence, they picture all of this stuff, and then if they don't get the property or something goes wrong, and somebody like me comes in and tells them that there's, you know, a lot of damage, then it's a very emotional property. With investors, particularly multifamily and commercial buildings, it's just, does it pencil out or doesn't? Leverage, negotiation leverage during a transaction. And I'm surprised at how many people don't take advantage of doing an inspection during a multifamily or a commercial purchase, or even a sale, like I said, a pre-listing sale. You always want to take advantage. It gives you that additional leverage that the other side wouldn't have. You go in and there's a cost report that you asked about things that we charge extra for. We have a cost report that we do also, which will basically take all of our report and create an entire cost estimate based on the findings of our report. And that is great because you usually get that back within that for commercial and multifamily, you get that back in about 48 hours. For single family residents, you get that back in 24 hours.
Is that additional charge?
Yeah, it's $85 for single family. I think it's $200 for up to 8 units. And then it's like $300 for commercial, like office buildings and things like that. And they'll literally take it down and create a cost estimate. And it gives you a good place to negotiate from, because this is we don't produce it. It's an independent third party that produces it, and that gives us that unbiased look at the cost.
Do you have a sample of it?
I do. It's online. It's on my website. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, immediate concerns. You're going to find out what immediate concerns are, and you can predict future expenses. If they're holding on to a property for a while, you want to know, hey, the roof is 15 years, between 10 and 15 years old. Knowing that the average lifespan of a shingle roof like this one is about 25 years, you know, you're past the lifetime. So figure out, and I'll get into property assessments in a second, because there is a service that we provide where we actually break down those costs, estimating into the future. A baseline inspection for tenant. This is great for I can't tell you how important this is for particularly in this market right now, with all the tenant protections in place. If you're representing a buyer for a multifamily, having a baseline inspection before the buyer takes possession of the property is great, because the last thing that you want is a tenant saying, hey, this is, there's this, and this wrong with this property. I see this every day, and therefore I'm not paying rent. And so having that baseline inspection before they take possession, you can have it documented with photographs saying this is the condition of the plumbing, this is the conditioning of the heating and air conditioning, there were no roof leaks. And then it makes it a lot easier to deal with tenants. And for that matter, the next one I think it is inspect every unit.
Question
Yes.
regarding baseline inspection for tenants.
Mhm.
What kind of inspection would that be involved in baseline?
Well, the baseline, having a property inspection as you're purchasing the property creates a baseline. In that you know the exact condition of the unit at the time of purchase. And this is why we recommend that every unit be inspected. But you'd be amazed on the larger buildings, like this one, we actually did every single unit here. Sometimes the investors don't want to inspect all of them. They want to do a sampling, a representative sample, and they'll do maybe 50%. But it's that one unit that didn't get inspected that is gonna be the one that will eventually come and say, hey, well, there's this wrong with it, and I'm not paying rent. And I'm sure you've probably heard about this. There's been tenants because of the pandemic and leading after the pandemic who haven't paid rent in a couple of years, basically. Yes.
How many days does it take you to complete every unit? inspection?
This one here, we did in one day. I went with
The
my whole,
60 units?
with my whole team, yes.
How many?
So we have 4 inspectors on site
One
and we
day.
do it all in one day.
Oh,
What do you do when you come across, let's say, for example, maybe one of those buildings or on a property, ADU or something that's not permitted?
Nothing. Unfortunately, we can't comment on anything, whether it's permitted or not. It takes, it makes your job harder if we say something like that. Because the buyer or the seller is gonna say, hey, you're not a city inspector, it's not your position to be saying whether it's permitted or not, you don't know whether it's permitted or not. And in my experience from speaking with other inspectors throughout the country, it creates more havoc than not to do that. So we stay, our standards of practice actually prohibit us from commenting anything on whether it's permitted or not. Yes,
Yeah, I have a little nervous about the inspector. That when they do the inspection, they sometimes they overemphasize the problem, potential problem. To like kill the deal.
you need a better inspector. You need to call us. No, all jokes aside, I see it, I agree with you. And that is the hallmark of an inexperienced inspector. And I train a lot of inspectors and I mentor a lot of inspectors throughout the country now. And the inexperienced inspectors are the ones that say, oh my God, there's a crack here, you need a structural engineer. You know, there's a crack on the foundation, oh my God, you need, a foundation contractor. And, you need to know the difference between, okay, there's a small vertical crack on the foundation. There's no displacement this way or this way. There's no settlement this way or this way. There's no erosion. Okay, it's a crack. You fill in the crack. Structurally speaking, there's nothing wrong with the building. It's 100 years old. It's gone through a couple of earthquakes, a couple of cracks. Don't mean that you need a new foundation. But I've seen a lot of reports. And I'll mention this right now. I usually do it at the end. But if you ever have a report, if you're a listing agent, I had one just last night, and you ever have any questions on the inspector, don't hesitate, send it to me. I'll review it and I'll tell you honestly what I think. Like the one that I reviewed last night, the foundation estimate came in at $85,000. And yes, and I looked at it and I'm like, this guy's on crack.
Has one for 130,000.
Yeah, so I sent it to my foundation guy and I put them in contact and now they're trying to figure out, because the buyer came in with something ridiculous to try to negotiate it.
Now, what do most, I'm sorry, do most of you have a guideline to follow? Not
Yes.
over-
We have standards of practice of what we can and cannot do, or what we can't say. For example, talking about permits. Certain things that we can't talk about, and this is why it's so frustrating for realtors, is that I'm sure you've seen this in home inspection reports. Further evaluation by a licensed contractor is recommended. It makes all realtors pull their hair out because, you know, it's like, okay, well, why did you do the inspection then if you're gonna recommend me to a contractor? And I'll tell you why. Because in California, there is no licensing requirement to be a home inspector or property inspector, like in other states. We're about 50-50 almost throughout the country. And so pretty much anybody can say, I'm a home inspector, and they're a home inspector. And this is where the inexperience of all that terminology in a report comes in. The only difference between that and us, for example, is that I am a licensed general contractor. I am a certified building construction inspector. And so therefore, we can comment on things that other inspectors can't. Because if you look at the building and professions code, it states specifically that we cannot comment as inspectors on anything that you don't have expertise or licensing for. So if I were a plumbing contractor, I can break it down and in the inspection report and say, this is what you need and this and that. But because I'm not a plumbing contractor, I'll tell you, hey, this is what I think is wrong with it, but you do need a plumbing contractor or HVAC. Sorry, go ahead.
Now, what if you find out, during the inspection process, you find out that, there are 5 units, you only have 4 water units? Would that raise a flag?
It does raise a red flag, not so much for the permitting thing, like we talked about,
It's up to 5%.
but it raises a red flag. I'll tell you, if I were to go in there, like I said, there's 5 units there and I only find 4 gas meters, 4 electrical meters. Now, my main concern is how overloaded is that electrical panel? And gas, not so much. But mainly, that's my concern. That's a red flag that it raised. Because now you have 2 entire households off of 1 electrical panel. And there's a possibility, especially on some of the older panels that I'm gonna touch on right now, there's a possibility you're gonna overheat that panel. And so I'm gonna look very, very close at the electrical panel, look for signs of scorching, melting, and things like that.
But when it occurs to you, only for 4 units?
Oh,
And
yes,
then the owner
absolutely.
subdivided into, 1 unit
I've
into 2 units.
I have
So-
seen
So
the-
it's not
the
an overloading problem, it's a.
Divide
it's a
wall.
dividing wall, yeah. Yeah, I've seen some very creative ways of breaking down the house. There's one right up the street right here that I did. That is a 2-story house and it has been divided up into like 4 units plus an addition in the back, which was divided into 2 units, plus the garages, which were converted into an additional 2 units. Off of that one property.
So they can sell for more money, More
Yeah.
unit, more money.
More units, more money. Yeah. So the other concern that I
So
have,
You pointed out
when-
to the client?
yeah, I do. Particularly, like I said, the other red flag that I have, for example, is egress. How much emergency egress or
Right, that makes sense.
windows and doors do they have
Mhm.
to be able to get out? Because I've seen some configurations where now you have a small unit here, the bedroom is back here, it has a tiny little window in the bedroom. In case of a fire, nobody's getting out.
That's
Safety issues.
It's a safety issue, and so I do point out those things. And I tell them, hey, listen, yeah, you have 5 units and you have 4 meters. The draw on that other meter is gonna be pretty high, and it's split, by the way. So there's 2 units on here, so in those situations, usually it's the landlord who's paying that electric bill.
Right.
Because they can't split it between the 2 tenants, so guess what, you're paying that bill. Even though the other 3, you might not, but that 4th one you're gonna pay. Okay. And of course, yeah, you can, having this information, if you're coming in as a new purchaser, you can create a maintenance plan for the building. What things need to be done when. If you know that the roof is, 12 years old, 15 years old, you know that you're gonna start having problems with that roof from that point forward, because it's reaching the end of its life. And so you need to plan on your budget. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. We need to plan on your budget for spending money on the roof, roof repairs. Same thing with old galvanized plumbing. And, I talk with the investors, it's like, hey, you have old galvanized plumbing. This is, I guarantee you, this is where your number one repair costs are going to go, is into old plumbing, galvanized plumbing that's gonna start rusting and leaking. Yes,
Isn't it that you also ask for if there's a maintenance, property maintenance management?
yes, that's,
You
that's,
also ask for.
and that's the one thing that I left out on your team. On that list of your team, a good management company. I work with a guy, nice guy, Edward Wu, who manages property. Out here and in the city of Los Angeles. And when they show up, these particular investors, they show up, there's like 8 people there. But they have their maintenance guy, they have the handyman, they have the property manager, they have me, and everybody goes through at the same time. And when they take possession of that property, everybody has their individual responsibilities and they already know what to do. And it makes it so much easier for the investor. So the property inspection, and this is where I'm going to differentiate between a property inspection and a property assessment. There's 2 different things. So the property inspections, you were asking about this. We look at the roof, heating and air conditioning systems. Regular wall units, wall heating units, about $1,200 to replace. On average. So if you're walking in there and most of the time in apartment buildings, you've probably seen this. There's furniture in front of the heater. I've seen some wrapped with like wrapping paper, like Christmas wrapping paper, foil. So it's important that they know the condition of the heating system, because that's one of the things that if the heating system is not working, that's one of the things that a tenant can come back and say, my heater's not working. That's one of the things that makes it uninhabitable legally. And therefore, I'm not paying rent until it's fixed. And I had an interesting client had an interesting case out here in Pasadena, which I was dealing with for a few months. And all of the tenants, there was only 5 units there, all of the tenants, none of the heaters worked. And none of them were paying rent. So this guy was holding on to this property and that's why he decided to sell it. That's where I came in to do the inspection. But they hadn't paid rent in almost a year. So he was making nothing off of the property.
His lover will be sued.
Yeah.
They can sue him.
Yeah.
For no reason.
So Federal Pacific Electric panels. Anybody seen one of those before? I'm sure you see them on single family homes a lot. I don't have a picture here.
Yeah, I do like.
Yeah, federal, yeah. On average to replace a regular, 100 amp electrical panel, you're looking at about $1,500 to $2,500 to replace one. Federal Pacific is a company that was sued out of existence many years ago because they made defective electrical panels.
Oh.
And so they caused a lot of house fires. And so they got bought out by Sylvania, I think it was, and then eventually they just closed down. But they were never recalled. And so there's still thousands of them out there. I see a lot of them here, apartment buildings and some single family residents. And the way that you know if you have a federal, there's a good article on my website about it, by the way. If you have Federal Pacific Electric panel, is that the breakers are orange. So if you look at that electrical panel and you see orange breakers, you know that panel has to be replaced right off the top.
Replace whole panel only 50.
Replace the whole panel. It's not worth it. They're designed in such a way. The breakers are defective. For example, if you turn off the breaker to replace a light fixture, sometimes the power keeps running. Not a good thing.
No.
Yes. If there's a short circuit, sometimes the breakers don't shut off, and that's what caused the fires. So if I run into those, I always recommend they be replaced.
Yeah, the whole panel is only
Between 1,500 and about 2,500 for a standard 100 amp panel.
how many, 200?
100 amp, yeah, you
100
want to,
amp,
you always
okay,
want to
100 amp,
upgrade
that's
to
why I
about
was
150.
surprised, that
Yes,
That's very low. That's good price.
Zinsco's the other thing. So if you open up your breaker panel and you see pastel colored breakers, like blue or like green, and then there's usually one red one. That's another problematic panel. They had issues with that as well. And again, I have a good article about it on my website. But these are the things that your investors are going to want to know if they're buying a multifamily. Yes,
Just the panel needs replacing, not the wiring, right?
no, just a panel. Yeah, just a panel. Unless you have that old knob and tube wiring, and then you recommend that it be upgraded.
If I upgrade, how much cost the whole house?
Depends. On an average size house, you're looking about $35 to $5,500 to, yeah, $3,500 to $5,500 on an
Very
average
reasonable
size
price.
house. Yeah,
But he doesn't have an electrician.
I don't have a good electrician. I'm just speaking from experience. No. Well, yes and no. We inspect solar panels for damage when we're up on a roof. Is a panel damaged? Is it cracked? Is it broken? Is it dirty? Sometimes the connections between the panel and the roof are loose. Or they're not sealed properly, so you're gonna get a roof leak in there. So to that extent, yes, the operation, the efficiency of the system, no, we don't. That's a very specialized thing. Water heaters, we inspect water heaters and the age of the water heaters. The plumbing system, of course, everything that's visible. If we can get under the house or under the building, we're gonna get under, we're gonna take a look at the rest of the plumbing. Old galvanized or copper, I've mentioned that. The galvanized, particularly for multifamily, that's where property investors are gonna spend the most of their money on repairs of older galvanized pipes. In that case, I usually recommend that they just repipe or negotiate a credit towards repiping. Yeah, one leaky faucet can cost $100 a month on your water bill. And if you're the landlord and you're paying that cold water, you want to know if there's leaks in the faucets in the bathrooms and the kitchens. This is where a baseline inspection is perfect.
So baseline means all the units.
All the units, yeah. Yeah, we literally go and open every single faucet in the kitchen, in the bathroom, the tub, the toilet, the shower, check it for leaks, check underneath the sinks for leaks, make sure everything is draining okay, so that we have an idea of what the main sewer line might be doing. And then, of course, the foundation. Like I said, if we can't get in, all I need is 7 inches to get one of our robots in there. And interiors of every unit. Now, the property assessment is a little different, and this is where we do charge a little extra for. Because now that we've done the physical inspection, these are things that multifamily and commercial investors are going to want to know on top of the condition of the property. And so we do the research on this for, obviously that's the general inspection. But for example, how many of you are familiar with SB 721, which is coming up next year? SB 721 passed a couple of years ago due to a tragedy out in Berkeley. You've heard about it. Fifth story balcony that collapsed.
Students.
Killed 6 students. Exactly, yeah. So because of that, SB 721 and your investors, your buyers are going to want to know this, requires that all balconies be inspected by January 1st, 2025. And so that's going to be a pretty good added expense for balcony inspections, one. And if there's damage to the balconies, which we're seeing a lot now, because we're doing a lot of inspections right now for balconies. And I have a management company that just called me yesterday that has 75 buildings coming in this week and start looking at them. And if you have damage on this balcony right here, you're looking at tearing all of this off right here. All the stucco, doing the work here, which usually requires engineering, building permits, inspections.
Because it's structural.
Because it's structural. So that's an astronomical expense. So part of our regular inspection includes a balcony inspection.
Oh,
Yes, which means
Baseline, the
which-
baseline.
the baseline, yeah, which
Okay,
meets the
cool.
requirements for SB 721.
cool.
So that your investor doesn't have to go and get a separate inspection.
Awesome.
And just so you guys know, we do have a session on that coming up, right?
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes.
So we're gonna have a session on condos, townhouses and balconies.
Can I ask
Sure.
a question? I have a friend that lives in this apartment complex. There's 38 units,
Mhm.
and it sold in 2020 for close to $10 million.
Okay,
There's problems happening now where to the point where there was no use around the window because of the rain.
Yeah.
Window, kitchen, underneath the rug. Anyway, she had to get an attorney. She was staying in a hotel for 3 weeks.
wow.
The city got involved in everything, but there's other tenants there that are not saying anything because they're afraid to
They're
say anything.
I
But anyways, I mean, they did a pre-inspection on this unit when they purchased it back in 2020, but now all these things are coming up regarding mildew. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other units in the same. complex.
There's a lot of reasons why mold and mildew tend to grow. Because I'm a certified mold inspector as well.
Oh, good.
Yes. And so are all of my guys
Okay.
So you can identify that because you're an inspector for that, right?
for that, exactly. Yes.
How much do you charge for mold inspection?
Mold inspection is $275 and it includes 3 samples.
Awesome.
And
That's
they
really
are,
good.
they are lab, they come with lab analysis and we send them out to the lab. And, yeah, it's very reasonable. It's very reasonable.
Let's say
Um,
some rental property, the tenant, suspect that they got a mold. So-
One of my guys did one just this morning, for that exact same reason. The tenant, suspects that there's mold in the unit.
Right.
Their allergies are going through the roof
Right.
and they're having congestion and things like that.
Okay.
And so they called somebody and they referred us to them. And so we went and did 2 different things this morning. My inspector Tony did. One, we did a mold assessment where we took air samples throughout the unit for mold spores. And then we did an air quality assessment. And that's a different type of thing because the air quality, especially if you suffer from allergies, will pick up things like micro organisms that are not necessarily mold, down to 2.5 microns, which is really, really fine dust. Dust, dander, VOCs from paint and furniture. Furniture is allowed to have a certain level in the United States of VOCs and formaldehyde, particularly compressed wood like this. Uses has formaldehyde and is called off-gassing. So whenever you move into a new house, for example, all those cabinets, all that carpet, all of that paint that's brand new, it's off-gassing. So that nice little new house smell that you smell is called off-gassing, and some people react to that because if the gases are too high, and so this is the air quality assessment. We're looking for VOCs,
So
formaldehyde. Yes,
For $220 for mold inspection.
the mold we did for 275,
Oh,
and that includes 3 samples. The indoor air quality is only $150. And then,
Okay, so they
and
have to-
that picks up the amount of fine dust that you have. It picks up formaldehyde and it picks up VOCs. And everybody has different levels of comfort with these things. And so some people might react to one thing, some people might react to a different thing. Now, in answer to your question, there's a lot of different things that can cause mold. A lot of the time, especially during the winter time with the cold days like today, where you have a heated room and it's cold outside. If you have older windows that are not double pane, that difference in temperature between the glass is going to cause condensation. So now you have, a drape in front of the window. And you have hot air here, you have cold air here. It's gonna trap the moisture between the glass and drape. And that's what causes the condensation in the window, and if you don't clean that off, it creates mildew, just like your shower, basically. So in answer to that particular question, ventilation is key. You need to, number one, if you see that on the windows, a tenant should clean it, just like you do in your shower. And ventilate it, just like you do when you're taking a shower. You open the window if you don't have a fan, you open the window, let some fresh air in. Yeah. No, ultimately, and in my experience, and not to give you legal advice, but in my experience, just from having to deal with some of these tenants, ultimately, it's the landlord who. That's where it falls.
Even though.
It's the even though a good part of the time. Code violations. So this is the difference between a regular physical inspection and an assessment. And the assessment, we can go and do the research with the city and call the local building department, call the local code enforcement department or housing department and say, hey, are there any violations on this property? Open violations right now. So that when the buyer takes possession of the property, they're not going to get a nasty letter from the city saying, hey, we have all these housing violations and now you're on the line for them. So we provide that service before they take possession. That way they know exactly what they're getting. Soft stories. Anybody know what a soft story is? Okay, during the Northridge quake, I'm sure you've seen pictures of this, where out in Van Nuys, Northridge, you would walk by or see the entire apartment building completely collapse over the carport and over all the cars. Those are all soft stories. Those are the ones that have carports on the lower level, and the building is on top. And so you have one structural wall here, one structural wall here. There's some good info on the website about this. And then you have a series of steel posts supporting the structure. What we came to find out during the Northridge quake is that those steel posts didn't hold up very well. And so when the building starts racking and it starts going like this,
Right.
eventually the whole thing just goes whoop, and it falls over. And that's what happened. So there are 5 cities right now that have ordinances in place for retrofitting, mandatory retrofitting of soft storage buildings. So if you are a apartment investor, you want to know if it's soft storage, because you're looking at spending $20,000 or more on retrofitting.
I'm just curious about the soft story, does it apply to maybe termite?
No, not really. Now, it's the different type of construction where usually there's like one wall or 2 walls here, but then there's nothing here and here. And that's why they call it a soft story, because it doesn't have all 4 walls and the intermediate walls, the structural walls.
So for structural design.
Poor structural design. Yeah, we came to find out, poor structural design. So
So what
If-
are those criteria?
if you're looking at a property in the city of Los Angeles, they have an ordinance for mandatory retrofitting. If you're looking in the city of Pasadena, they have one. City of Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and Beverly Hills. So I have, if you go on my website, there's a whole section on the individual requirements for each city. There's a whole separate page for each city. But again, if you're representing a buyer, this is what they want to know for multifamily, or what they should know.
It can also affect a single, like a townhome,
But yeah,
if they're in a building like that.
townhomes, yeah. Apartment buildings, a lot of apartment buildings got converted to condos. And so condos, they're still the same structure, whether you call it a condo or you call it an apartment building, it's the same structure. Yes,
What about the bedroom located on top of the garage? You see so many condos or townhouses,
Mhm.
they have a bedroom built on top of the garage.
Yeah.
Is that considered as a soft story?
It can be, yes, depending on how the frame of the garage. There are some structural retrofits that you can do even to a garage, a regular. You have a 2-car garage and then you have a unit up on top.
Right.
Well, the garage, you have one wall here, and one wall along the back, but there's nothing down here except for maybe a post supporting
not
the
even a
beam. So technically, yes, that's a soft story, even though it's residential.
Right.
But there are certain things that they can do, you know, like when you have a vehicle door and then there's usually a little piece of wall on either side of that vehicle door. That can be replaced with a structural steel thing, and they're pre-made, Simpson Strong Tie makes them. And it keeps the building from going like this. Because it makes it rigid with that steel, it's a steel corner basically, so the whole building will go like this instead of like this. But yes, in answer to your question, yes.
Wonder why, I'm just wondering why, you know, why only those 5 cities? Because primarily, if you build a building, a structure.
Yeah.
You should pass engineering.
Yeah.
Architectural design.
Eventually everybody will. Eventually everybody will, throughout the state. But these are, like, for example, city of Los Angeles. Geographically, one of the largest areas in California. So you're covering a good part of that. And the individual cities between that, you know, those areas are the ones who implemented this. But eventually you're gonna start seeing this a lot more. Mhm.
So back to your retrofitting. Are you talking about the, I don't know exactly what it look like, but I hear about it, is put all the bullets, link to the foundation to the base, put each bullet there.
Oh,
cover-
like the bolting, for houses? Yeah,
Is that
that's a different
retrofitting?
type of thing. No, for soft stories, what they do is they build what's called a momentum frame. And a momentum frame is a heavy steel frame. It's an I-beam
Okay,
that creates a box basically.
upgrade the
Like this
boxes
and like this, and it's a
Okay.
series of heavy steel boxes.
from each
And they
corner.
put them in on the front side of the carport, on the back side of the carport. And that prevents, like I said, the
Oh, it's
building from
outside,
going
it's
like
not
this.
foundation doing, it's outside.
No, it's outside, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
not foundation, I'm talking about. Okay, so how about people digging the metal all the way down, each post costs $2,000, one of my friends did. First, put a, I don't know, it's not necessary, just put a metal post, starting all the way to the foundation. to the wall,
You're
to
talking
touch
the helixal, oh my God, I forget what they're called right now. But what they do when there's an issue with a house settling
On the hillside,
on
yeah,
one
yeah.
side or on a hillside, it looks like a big screw, like a big,
Yeah.
huge screw.
Yeah,
And they literally drive it, depending on how deep bedrock is.
Yeah, bedrock, they have
Bedrock
limits.
can be 10, 15, 20 feet. They drive that
all the way,
sphere all the way down, and then they connect it to the side of the foundation
right,
to keep it from settling. And they'll do that every like 6 feet.
yes.
All the way
that's
across
something
the
really
side.
fun.
Yeah.
I'm going for each
That's
post.
typically for foundation settlement,
Oh, okay,
problems,
that's
yeah.
different.
not for
Thank you.
retrofitting.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
Foundations.
So after the inspection, I think I touched on most of these things already. So the report will usually take a few days. Because especially if I have 4 people working on that, you know, I have to
You have to
compile
collaborate, yeah.
everybody's
Yeah, yeah.
information. Go ahead.
When you make that report, what is the number one thing that you recommend sellers to fix? Cause that number one problem gets problems in. the
Yeah.
deal.
Most of the time, it's safety items. That's the seller,
Makes sense.
as a realtor, just like a single family home, you're gonna ask for the safety items first. Everything else beyond that is negotiable. Pretty much everything, especially if it's just an old building and it has old plumbing and things like that. That's a negotiation thing. If there's actual damage, like foundation damage or something that might be an immediate concern, those are the things that we ask for.
What's the average lifespan for galvanized plumbing?
About 30 years roughly.
So only?
Only.
Oh,
Only.
Eventually it'll.
I've seen some that are 50 and 60 years old.
Like here.
And so the thing about it, I don't know if you've ever been in a place that has galvanized plumbing, when we walk in and do an inspection, we can tell because one, the water pressure. Galvanized pipes, when they rust, they rust from the inside out. So if you see rust on the outside of the pipe, that means that the rest of the inside is pretty rusted. And as it starts rusting and starts going like this, you start getting less and less water pressure. And sometimes if you walk into a bathroom, for example, and you turn on the tub and you get that first 30 seconds, you get that brown water,
Yeah,
that's rust. That's flushing out. That's rust. And so, yeah, on average about 30 years, and then it should be replaced. Yes.
And going back to the physical inspections and physical assessment.
Yeah.
Is that standard for all inspectors? Or
No.
you don't even-
For commercial buildings, like office buildings and stuff like that, a PCA, a property condition assessment is pretty standard. For the, I don't know if you remember when we talked about it when I was here last about commercial buildings, that's pretty standard. For multifamily, it's not. It depends on, number one, on the investor and the size of the investment. If you're looking at 200 units, you're probably gonna want a condition assessment because you're gonna wanna know all of these things ahead of time. If you're buying a 4-unit, realistically, you're gonna get the physical done and the assessment, you know, you're not gonna worry about it. Yeah, depends on the investor and how sophisticated the investor is and what they want to see. Some investors, depending on the size of the investment, they expect these things to be done. This is what I mean. You have to have a good team. They expect certain things. Investors that are buying, like I said, 1 to 4, even 8 units, typically are not going to do all of these things that I just said.
Okay, I remember last time for the conversions.
Yeah.
You also request the management to give you.
The management, yes, we do a survey with the management.
Maintenance.
We interview the management and we ask for maintenance records.
Correct.
Yeah, and have their maintenance person walk the property with us before the inspection. Yes.
Talking about the foundation get folded, because
Uh-huh.
we've been asked so many times for that question.
Yeah.
I was told that all foundations are folded. Is that a fair statement?
No.
No.
We have the San Gabriel Valley in particular has a lot of old houses and a lot of older apartment buildings.
What does that mean, foundation?
Foundation bolting didn't actually start until the late 40s. The late 1940s is where I've seen, of all the inspections that I've done, houses that were built in the late 1940s and when I first start seeing bolting. And they're really tiny little bolts. And over the years, the requirements started getting stricter and stricter. And so instead of every 8 feet, it became every 6 feet. Now it's every 4 feet. Now the bolt has to be 5/8 inches. Now the washers on the bolt have to be 2 inches and they have to be square. And because we find out typically during earthquakes, what works and what doesn't. And so the building codes change periodically. So anything prior to late 1940s, you're probably not going to find any bolting up.
Oh. I saw the house was built, 1904.
Nope, no bolting. No bolting. I guarantee it. So,
Still good, the house is still there.
yeah. So,
Wait for the big one.
so one of the things that we offer, whether it's single family residence or multifamily or commercial, and you'd be amazed at how many people do not take us up on this. We offer a Zoom meeting. After everybody has a report, because particularly multifamily, you're looking at a 200-page report. And after everybody gets a chance to look at it, the realtors, the buyers, the investors, we offer a Zoom meeting, a free Zoom meeting. That way, if anybody has any questions about any aspect of the property or the report, we'll sit with everybody in a Zoom, like, okay. Because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but we used to, is okay. No, the realtor would call with a question. Okay, let me relay that to the buyer. Buyer would call with a question. Okay, let me relay that to the realtor. Now we have to relay it to the seller. So I said, let's get everybody in the same room at the same time,
But stories.
and it makes it a lot easier.
Not only that, it changes per
It's a story
conversation.
change.
Exactly, yes.
Story change.
But again, only about 10% of people take me up on this. It blows my mind. Yeah, this is where we separate the big stuff from the little stuff, and the question that you had about somebody over exaggerating things like this. This is where we tell them, like, hey, listen, it's a crack. Yeah, no big deal.
Another question.
Yes.
How reliable are your statement? What is something wrong? I mean, like, let's say, could be wrong, or could be something.
No, we don't diagnose what may have caused it. Because there's a lot of things, for example, if I see a crack, there's sometimes that I'll call out soil conditions. Because it's a well-known fact. For example, if you're down in the South Bay area, Torrance, Playa, around there, very well known to have, expansive soil. And so anytime we get called out there, I can almost put my paycheck down saying that there's gonna be foundation problems. Because expansive soil, there's a good article on my website. When it gets wet, it does exactly that. It expands, it goes up, it pushes out, and over time of it, but when it dries, it contracts. And over time but it doesn't do it evenly. It goes like this. And so it makes houses move like this. It causes cracks on foundations. So when I see cracks on foundations and I know that it's expansive soil, then I'll say, yeah, look, it's a soil that caused it.
So on your report, say,
Potential that problem.
Fear, I mean, hey, you know.
No, not necessarily. As a matter of fact, depends on how you deliver the information. If you educate people, because the follow-up to that article about expansive soil, I have another article is how to live with expansive soil. So when I tell people, hey, you have expansive soil on the report, by the way, here's an article about how you can live with expansive soil. For example, in the summertime, you wouldn't think when it's 100 degrees, watering your area around your house. But it's critical because if you have expansive soil in those hot summer months, it's going to shrink, and then the weight of the house is going to go like this, and it's going to settle. So it's critical that you maintain it to a certain moisture level, so that even in the middle of summer, so that it doesn't shrink.
It's
Tony,
maintainable.
Yes.
do you know of certain areas that have a lot and you don't see it in certain areas, stuff like that?
It's hit and miss, some
is it?
places more than not. Those areas that I just mentioned are just really known for that type of stuff. Walnut, for example, there's a golf course out in Walnut. That entire area is expansive soil.
Does the city government knows that, or?
Yeah, everybody
They
knows.
give information to the.
Google a particular city and then add
That's the job.
expansive soil.
Expensive soil.
Expansive.
It's not expensive.
And you will find all of the different requirements that certain cities have certain requirements. For example, in those areas right there, the cities require that the foundation walls be built deeper into the concrete because they know that the soil is going to move. So in those areas, you're required to go an additional 6 inches on the foundation. Most cities already know where the expansive soil is.
You know, recently there's a giant house on the top of the hill. And all of a sudden the foundation is kind of big way. So let's say you do an inspection on those kind of property. How would you advise the potential buyer to be prepared?
Depends on what we see. Preventative measures, if I see a hillside and there's no vegetation on it, depending on the type of soil, let's say, hey, look, there's not enough vegetation. So it's going to erode with the rain. Now, if I see that it's already eroded and it's getting close to the house, I'm gonna say, okay, you definitely want to talk to somebody a professional about this. But if I don't see that, I'm not gonna alarm anybody. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah, we're not gonna alarm anybody unnecessarily, no.
Yeah, that's why,
Yeah.
that's why those inspections you do recommend, right? You do recommend.
Yeah, when it's something serious, you have to. But there's a difference between knowing what's serious and what's not. Yeah. How much will it cost to fix? I mentioned this about the repair pricer report already. I think it's a great tool, particularly if you're doing a pre-listing, and everybody should be doing a pre-listing inspection, so you don't have to get into negotiations. Replacement costs. One of the things that we do in assessments is we'll do a spreadsheet on the bigger properties and say, okay, here's 2023 all the way to 2030 with a column here. We know that we have about 8 years left on this roof. So we're going to calculate what the replacement cost of that roof is going to be 8 years from now, including inflation at about 2 to 3% per year. So when you get to these 8 years, it's not the same that you would pay today to replace that roof. It's going to be plus inflation. So those are same thing with HVAC systems. Things like that, that the capital improvements 5-10 years from now, it's not going to cost the same that it does now. And that's one of the services that we provide, is that we're going to do all those calculations for you. We're going to give you an estimated number of what it's going to cost 8 years from now to replace that roof.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sorry. Most of your inspectors have that kind of educated background or knowledge about how much it costs and calculate it.
Usually I do the calculations on that kind of stuff. Yeah.
No, but then like,
He's the one
There is nothing that goes, my inspectors are very, very qualified, but there is nothing that goes out the door without me seeing it.
maybe you are, but then what
Yes.
about other inspectors?
Yeah.
How do we?
We use other
Kind of
company, use him.
Oh, yeah,
They call you?
like my inspector, yeah, but he called me, yeah. Yeah, no,
The guy.
no, the reason why I do a lot of these things is because over 25 years of doing this, I stay on top of the market. Once upon another lifetime, I used to have a real estate license for my own investment. And so I stay on top of the market because the real estate market affects my business. So I'm always on top of NAR numbers. I'm always on top of the Mortgage Bankers Association numbers. I want to know what the interest rates are doing. I want to know, what the trends are in what areas. For example, Inland Empire right now is still hot for industrial warehouse spaces. They closed their year really strong, even though residential didn't, and they're still going strong. Right? Montana, blowing up for warehouse space right now. As a matter of fact, they got sued because they were building too much warehouse space. They were overbuilding commercial and industrial, so they got sued.
That's where the tax is coming.
Yeah.
Money for the city.
So yeah, no, we learn along the way, and we adjust to provide the services that you need, basically. So I mentioned my blog several times. Check it out on the website. I have articles. I nerd out on stuff, and I'm writing articles all the time. You probably get some of my emails with the different articles that I write. And for giggles, sometimes I'll sit there and I'll read at home about expansive soils. And my wife laughs, but yeah. So check out the blog. And last but not least, and I mean this, and I say it every time that I come or anywhere that I speak, if you ever have a question, if you're ever at a property and you see something that doesn't look right, take a picture of it, text it to me. My card right there, the link on that card right there is going to be my personal cell phone number, not an office number. That's it. Any questions?
Another question, was your company or name of the inspector would be on the Yelp side? That we can check it out, hey, this is recommended.
On the what?
Inspector, well, yeah.
Yelp.
On the
Oh.
Yelp.
Are you on Yelp?
On Yelp, I try not to be on Yelp. Look me up on Google.
Google is a good, you have a Google business.
And I'll tell you why. I have 245 5-star reviews on Google right now. I have about 100 Yelp reviews right now, but you can only see about 50 on Yelp.
You have Facebook?
I do have Facebook, I have Instagram. Because Yelp tries to sell you advertising.
Right.
And so what happened is that I was getting reviews and I was outranking people who were paying for advertising. And so they would call me and call me and call me to spend money with them, and I didn't want to spend money with them. And all of a sudden, my reviews started disappearing. And they said, oh, it's the algorithm. that does it."
Yeah, right.
So if you go, I challenge you, go on my Yelp page and scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's a little link that says, these are the reviews that are not recommended. Click on that, and there's an additional 52 reviews. All 5-star reviews that they removed, because I wouldn't pay them for advertising. Google doesn't do that.
How much is an average cost for air conditioning nowadays for residential property?
Are we talking complete replacement, or are we just
A new.
brand new? On an average size house, under 2,000 square feet, between 6,000 and 7,000, roughly.
That's for like a
For a
carrier. or-
Carrier with a condenser.
Right.
outside, In the garage or in the attic or something.
Yeah, my
like
house
that.
is 100-year-old this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And we never needed the AC because it.
I would say closer to the 7,000 if it's
Yeah.
brand new, because they have to do all the duct work. They have to run the electrical, and put a new sub panel for the electrical,
Yes.
for the condenser.
Okay.
And so you're looking a little more expensive. That's why I ask, is it new or is it a replacement?
No, it also
Yeah.
depends on what your the Sears that you're at.
Yes.
That's the efficiency
The
of it.
efficiency, yeah, the efficiency, yeah.
15 series was recommended, that's what 15 series and above, to be energy efficient.
To be energy efficient, correct.
All right.
Yeah, for the big commercial, like that, you know, this commercial thing. You being an inspector, you said you have to do it. Then you can have a, you know, give service to your client, do a free listing inspection, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, some people are saying that, you know,